All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the general format that we've done in the past, and please guys give me some feedback on if this has continued working. I was going to go around and do a quick round of intros, and then everyone can kind of give me some feedback on how their current development process with the SDK is going, any problems you guys have run into since the last time we chatted, any things that we can improve. And then I would talk briefly about upcoming roadmap on the SDK. I've also got Bez here as well, so if you guys have some more specific technical questions, we're happy to dig into those as well. Also, I'd love some feedback on other things you'd like to see out of this call. So I can go first. My name is Jack Zamplin. I'm the product manager on the SDK. Most recently, I've had issues with the SDK. I maintain an application, the SDK application tutorial, and it's been switching from dep to go mod was a little bit painful on that side of things. Making sure we were in sync across all the repos, but I think that once we've made the switch, it's been nice. Also, a few breaking changes in that 0.3.3 release, which we just upgraded to, which were not super well documented, so chasing those down was not very fun at all. So that would be my 2 cents there. Bez, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Bez. You can also call me Alex. I'm one of the lead engineers on the SDK team. Also work on Tendermint from time to time. And I'm just here to pretty much help you guys answer any questions that you may have, technical, not technical, design, anything really revolving the SDK. So.
Nice. Aaron, Region Network folks, you guys want to go next?
Sure. I'm Aaron, working on Region Network. I've been a bit sick recently, so not my best talking voice, but yeah, we're developing a blockchain for ecological applications. And yeah, there's a couple PR that I have open, and then also a couple issues, one that I just recently closed, and another one that's kind of been sitting there. So far, mostly they're pretty smooth with using SDK.
Cool.
So, thanks, guys.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to dig into those issues a little bit because I think one of them is indexing, and I think one of them is governance proposal related. Gregory, did you have anything to add?
Nope. Just listening in, and we'll hop in if needed. But Aaron's running the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Shane and the True Story team.
Hey guys, I'm Shane. I'm working on an app called True Story. True Story lets people do stake-based voting on content to try and surface truth, I guess. So that's the high-level goal of the app. Yeah, I've been building on Cosmos for a while, and things have been going pretty smoothly. Most of what we're doing is kind of like, it's almost very like CRUD-like, so it hasn't been too bad. And I'll hand it over to Jorge, who joined us recently.
Yes, hi, my name is Jorge Hernandez. I work for True Story. Yeah, so basically, I haven't had any issues. It has been very smooth, like working with the Cosmos SDK. So I think the only question I had is before, in previous versions of the SDK, I think they were like some utilities for calculating gas consumption. I don't know if you have like some examples of how can we calculate these gas consumption for transactions.
Actually, an excellent question. Bez, do you want to chat about that for just a minute?
Yeah, I guess my first follow-up to that would be upon or at which version do you recall seeing utilities to estimate gas consumption? Because I'm not familiar with such utilities. I mean, we have transaction simulation. So when you specify gas auto, that will simulate the gas for you. But any kind of direct code utilities, I'm not familiar with.
Okay, yeah, I think that they are mostly on the client package. Let me see. There is like Cosmos SDK client utils, and there is like some
I think we moved that code into the client context, and there should still be a estimate gas function there. Is it not
Yeah,
for you?
the issue we had before is that we didn't know how much gas we were going to use for a given transaction. So we just, for now, ended up like putting some big fee for the gas. So we don't run out of gas when running transactions. But we want to tune in to a more fair fee for gas.
Yeah, the the gas estimation that you see in client utils, that's from you executing the transaction with gas being set to auto.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you set the transaction gas to auto, it'll simulate gas consumption for you, albeit it's not 100% accurate, and that is why, not sure why, but that's why we have a gas adjustment flag as well.
Okay, we'll check that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also an area where if you guys have a better way of doing that estimation, or maybe you're hacking around on the code and you find a better way to do that, like a better function that we could add to the SDK, we would love to upstream that. So Bez has worked heavily and designed our gas and fees model, basically, and so he's the right guy to ask about that. And if you need any help, please ping us on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you guys have run into in developing lately, Shane? Performance issues or usability stuff? I mean, I know that it is really easy to do CRUD. You know, you just write your getters and setters in the keeper, and then like you got it. But exporting functionality to clients, Genesis import export logic are kind of areas where I've heard folks having issues lately.
Yeah, I'm actually working on import export right now. The only concern I have is that the Genesis file could get massive with our content, and maybe how to manage that. We can probably break it up into multiple files or save it as binary. I think the Lino people are doing that. So yeah, there's various. Yeah, I talked to one of them and he said they're saving some of it as in a binary format.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But you lose the human readability aspect, right? So.
Yeah, so you had to build some kind of interface on top of it.
Okay.
That's an interesting point, because yeah, these things do get huge. I'm about to dump state on Gaia 13,000 and restart with that, so I'll get some firsthand experience with that pain point. I just dropped in. If you, sorry.
No, I was going to say I'll probably have way more questions when we actually have like live users and spin up a real testnet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just dropped in a pull request in the chat. One of our developers, Rigel, is working on the ability to sort of generalize this in the SDK. So maybe you're just writing a struct and then dropping it into a function, and it takes care of a lot of the Genesis logic for you. So this is
cool.
Yeah. So comments there would be super appreciated if you guys have some bandwidth to give feedback. This is something that the SDK kind of should take care of, and ideally should be generalizable for the whole community. So
okay, great. Yeah, I'll check this out because there is a lot of boilerplate in that code that could be simplified.
Yeah. So. Awesome. Aaron, have you guys run into any similar problems around Genesis?
No, but we're not using it as extensively. Like, my goal is also to, I have a fairly minimal amount of stuff in Genesis right now, and we're not trying to dump state. We're trying to just keep the same chain running and do upgrades if possible.
You know, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about the upgrade story in the SDK recently. Thank you, by the way, Aaron, for your PR that describes a way to do a chain halt with a transaction. That spurred some nice discussion, and Bucky has long had this idea of making a watcher process that would stop the chain at a specified height and perform the upgrade for you. So kind of out of band of the SDK itself, to kind of separate this concern of upgrade from the chain,
Mhm.
and potentially doing signaling. And what we talked about was the first step to this would be adding the ability to stop at a block height via the config file, and then potentially moving that into an unsafe RPC port. Tendermint already has an unsafe RPC endpoint where we could add a route to specify a block height. And then after that, all we need is a way to signal that what software version needs to be switched to in the upgrade process. The kind of sidecar upgrade process could take care of the rest. Do you have any thoughts on that strategy?
I mean, this current chain halting, I mean, I actually came up with it in a discussion on Slack with Ethan. And I said, you know, would this work? And he said, yeah, that would probably work. So I just went ahead and did it because I needed something. The reason why, I mean, config, whether it's in a config parameter or its own, you know, kind of KV store, I think it's sort of a minor issue. The reason for doing it on chain, I think, is, you know, you basically just want to, I've encountered if you screw up that chain halt, then you can end up in a weird state, especially if you had like one validator that went one block ahead. You know, there needs to be some way to prevent that software from working, unless you want to have a lot of validators that become Byzantine just because they didn't apply an upgrade correctly. So that's sort of my logic, is like it prevents validators from becoming unnecessarily Byzantine with their state. Sidecar process, I mean, so what I have set up for Regen Network, and I'm still trying to debug it. We're using NixOS. I don't know if you guys have used NixOS at all. We're using NixOS for.
Is that a fork of Cubes?
No, it's its own Linux distro, and it's based on reproducible builds. So every layer of the build process is kind of tracked by a hash. So it's like called like it's considered a functional package manager. So NixOS it's a 100% declarative configuration language in the background. So NixOS basically has these declarative configurations for setting up systemd modules, and basically I can look in the systemd module and see when the chain halts. It'll just crash, and then you can have a script just set up in your NixOS, which you don't even need a sidecar process really. It just can simply look at, you know, when you halt the chain, we're dumping some data, like basically what is the git commit. You could dump a bunch of data. You could say the hash for a binary and the URL to download the binary from whatever, and then you just have that systemd process when it halts, run the upgrade script. So, you know, I guess effectively it is a sidecar, but the sidecar I'm trying to use is systemd to run that.
That's very interesting. Do you have some details on that process written up, or is it still kind of under development right now?
No, I mean, it's working. It's just so I've been a little sick, and I was working it last week, and then
No, I mean, not to rush you. I mean, it's just like, that's a very cool approach. It's an easy way to do that kind of signaling. And it uses a bunch of existing tooling so that we don't have to write a whole ton of stuff. That's interesting to me. I'm looking at, I have a branch here where I'm testing it. And so basically I was testing it last week, and then I ran into something that crashed my chain, and I was like, oh no. And I haven't had a chance to get back on my testnet and just see why. Yeah. I had some null pointer exception, I think. Anyway, so yeah, if you look at this, I mean, here's the definition for the systemd module I have for, I mean, you have to look at NixOS a little bit, but it's just a simple script. And so currently I have it just that each validator has a Git repository. It will crash. It's going to pull the commit. It's going to do an upgrade. It's going to check out the commit, and then there's this command NixOS rebuild upgrade switch, and that basically with NixOS you can specify. I didn't do it here, but you can also specify like what is the hash of the distro that you're going to install, and so that it has a way of upgrading and rolling back the installation of your OS based on this declared. It's pretty cool. Nice. That's very cool. Well, if if you have like a one-pager written up on this process, it would be easier for me to kind of analyze that within the community and get feedback on it. So yeah, if you guys have some time over the next month or so, that would be really cool.
So what I can do, I mean, I have in the Go docs for the upgrade module a general description of how that works. I can when I debug this issue and open and like officially open that pull request, I can just put in a comment with a thorough description of how we're doing the automatic upgrades.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Lino Wallet team, thank you for joining us. I did, so I'm gonna come get to you guys in just a second, but just real quick, I did want to go through roadmap items for you guys, just to kind of tell you what's currently being worked on, what the next release looks like, and then some thoughts for the release after that. Des and I are in the middle of cutting the 0.3.4 release, and we're about to open the testnet up. That essentially contains a bunch of minor bug fixes. It is a state machine breaking upgrade because we basically synchronized some field names to be dashes instead of underscores within the state machine, and a couple of other stupid little changes like that. So nothing major, but a state machine breaking upgrade nonetheless. So should be relatively easy to bring your apps up from 0.3.3 up to 0.3.4. I think there are fewer breaking changes between 0.3.3 and 0.3.4 than there were between 0.3.2 and 0.3.3. Big change coming up in 0.3.5. We're currently working on splitting Gaia out of the SDK repo, and the SDK repo will now just actually be the standard development kit. And then we can start making some more thoroughgoing changes to the way app.go is put together and allow for a little bit more composability and flexibility with modules by encapsulating that a little bit better. So those are the near-term roadmap items. Is there anything folks would really like to see there? Well, also the other item is improvements to the governance proposal process, adding the ability to do parameter change proposals, as well as potentially these chain halting proposals as well, or in the config file /RPC, depending on which way we decide to implement. But those are the near-term items. Anyone have any questions about that? Cool. Shane?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you talk a little bit more about the atom transfer thing that's going to happen soon? So yeah, just a little more details on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I mean, really a change to Gaia, but not the SDK itself. And I do, moving forward, want to be a little bit more explicit about that, because we are trying to think of the SDK more as this product in and of itself, where it makes it easy for developers to build these state machines, doing exactly the kind of CRUD stuff that you're talking about. We forked the bank module in Gaia itself and basically killed the ability to do SYNs except for one very specific transaction. We have reverted to using the standard bank module that has been audited 3 times and has run on a couple of adversarial testnets. So it's essentially just a reversion to the old state of the app that we've been using for a long time. And there's currently a governance proposal on mainnet. If you're running a validator, please go vote. To enable transfers, this will be a 2-step process. 1 step to agree on a process to enable transfers, and then once we finally have a code hash, there will be an expedited governance vote for that code hash. We're looking to, again, flip the end of the week, but that is the current process for upgrading to transfers. Does that make sense, Shane? Awesome. Any other questions around that process? Would you guys want the ability to run with transfers disabled for a little while?
No, I guess my question is more higher level, because we're going to have to interface with the outside world at some point and allow some kind of value transfer. But I know that's further along the lines. I was just going to ask you about what are the timelines for
on IBC?
On IBC.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a weekly IBC meeting. It's actually also on Thursdays and every other Thursday, and it happens to be today, this morning. Chris Goes is doing an excellent job moving quickly through the specifications. We did have a very good idea of kind of what we wanted to build. I'm just going to go ahead and toss the tracking issue here so that you can see that. We've basically created finished the first round of preliminaries in a 2-week sprint, essentially. Those ICSs will be standardized here soon. And then we're going to move on to minimum viable insecure IBC, which is kind of like the minimum stuff that we need to do this protocol. We will start on implementation from there. So we're anticipating a first implementation about 3 months after launch. So right now about 2.5, a little under 2.5 months to that. And we're definitely tracking well. We have a highly engaged community of folks around that. A lot of people commenting on these PRs. Again, if you're interested in IBC and want to be involved in the process, we are doing it out in the open, and we really encourage community contributions there. So I would say probably 3 months for a POC, and I would imagine that it will be enabled on the hub after around 6 months. So that's what I've been saying. Does that timeline make sense, Jane?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I might even be able to chip in with some of the PRs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please look. And it's a great way to dust off your LaTeX skills. Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, Utai and the Lino Wallet team, thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. How's your last couple weeks in SDK development been?
It's cool, and actually we are trying to build up like a high TVS testnet on it, and yeah, so far so good.
Nice. Any challenges that you guys have run into recently?
Not actually, but we just currently encounter like some kind of like performance degrade, but we are trying to figure out why. So
That's probably on the Tendermint level.
I think so.
Awesome. Well, at this point, I kind of open any questions for me.
Do you have any question?
We're good.
You guys are good. Awesome. Well, if that's all, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it, and we'll do another one of these in a couple weeks. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, in between time, please feel free to reach out and grab me on Slack or any of our various platforms, and I'm happy to help you all out. So
I did have a couple questions on.
Yeah, Aaron, absolutely.
So, I mean, you can check out the comments I left in the indexing issue and let me know there if that's at all, the approach is at all interest as something more sort of standardized. There was one issue though that I did open around address formats that hasn't been responded to yet. I was going to drop in something else there, but basically the address format is fixed at 20 characters. There's a validation in the parsing of the address that you can't have an address that's not 20 characters or 20 bytes. So, and I opened this, there's basically the more different types of addresses you add, if you add different types of keys, the more potential for collision there is. And it also opens up, for instance, if there was a vulnerability in any of the key types, well, they're all sharing the same address space with the prefix. So, a vulnerability in any type of key would translate to any other type of key because it's an on-prefixed kind of just sort of address space. In our use case, particularly at the current point, there's a couple of address types that aren't key related that I want to create. We have like a groups module, which is sort of like a governance type thing. And I want to have addresses for groups, and I would like to prefix them and make them a different length, a shorter length. They're generated from auto increment IDs. So I don't know if address format is something that is talked about at all. Anyway, I mean
I do know we made a decision to make it 20 bytes at some point. I remember that discussion maybe 5 months ago. I don't remember exact justifications. Bez, do you have any light to shed on that?
I can't recall. Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, well, we'll try to drive some discussion on that issue.
Can you post the link, Aaron, in the Zoom chat?
Yeah, awesome, perfect. Also, in regards to your custom indexing support request, I think as Rigel mentioned on the issue, some really high cardinality items, i.e. geospatial data, is probably going to be best to index in an outside database. But there's a feature that's required in Tendermint, the ability to like do multiple tags of the same type for a transaction that's required for some of this custom indexing support. That's my understanding at least. And I believe that we got it merged in recently. So there are some changes on the SDK that we can make where developers will be able to specify their own tags that are indexed. Am I wrong on that, Bez?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, and I think that the way you're going to be able to do that is in the config file for your daemon process. There is an indexing thing, and you can specify which tags need to get indexed. But it was waiting on this fix to ABCI, which I believe we just shipped. Does that make sense, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean that sounds all good. I mean, what I mentioned in the indexing issue is we just created a way of just basically intercepting ABCI methods in base app to do the indexing on our side, just because we want to do it in an external data store, PostGIS, which has spatial indexes.
Well, that's really interesting. Bez did some similar work to toss data into Postgres from the hub. Is that a similar approach that you took?
Yeah, but mine is, what I did was more of just a completely external process where I was querying RPC endpoints.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I could.
Aaron, your approach, that sounds like it's something that we could add an outside database to the config file, have a couple of drivers, and write to a relational database for outside querying.
It could be. I mean, the way I'm doing it is I'm just setting it up. I have just a single environment variable I'm looking at. And if that environment variable is present, I'm just sending it up in my app that I'm going to create an indexer. And that intercepts all the ABCI methods and also goes into some of the keepers. For me, I kind of assessed the different approaches, and this seemed the simplest in terms of the fact that the keepers already have a lot of the app logic that I need to know what gets indexed. So, it may work for other cases, may or may not. Whether it's a config file thing or not, I mean, I guess that.
Well, the environmental variable in the config file is the same.
The what? Yeah, environmental
config, same.
But here I'm just kind of wiring it up in my app.go, like just so that, I'm actually intending to have a different indexer for a different purpose at some point. But, currently I have this implemented for Postgres. It's pretty straightforward, implements blocks, tags, transactions.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in a more generalized way to do this. I think it would be an excellent addition to the SDK because I can think of two other companies that I've been talking to lately who are building apps that would want this kind of external indexing support. So it's, something we haven't had the time to look at. If that's something that you want to open PR on, like obviously feel free.
Yeah, but I mean, the basic approach, and I mean, you guys can tell me if this approach makes sense, is you just have an interceptor in each one of the ABCI methods. And if you have an indexer defined on base app, then it will just forward all those ABCI structs to the indexer, and it can index them. If the indexer is not attached, then it ignores, doesn't get intercepted.
I think the only additional step that would be required there is that group of interceptors, as you're calling them, we could group under a driver, and that driver interface would have a couple of methods that you would need to implement, and then you could implement it in Postgres or Redis or Aurora or whatever you're interested in after implementing those interceptor methods.
Yeah, that's effectively what it does. Like there's an interface that's like an indexer interface, which is basically like a driver, and there's a Postgres implementation of it. You could do a Mongo implementation or whatever you wanted.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you could drop a link to that code, I'd love to take a peek at it.
Put it in the issue. I mean, I just closed the issue. If you want, I can reopen it. But I dropped it in the issue when I closed it. And
I'm seeing the 20 byte collision issue. What issue number is it for the indexing support?
Right, let me drop it in here. So yeah, I just posted a link to our implementation. But yeah, I mean, if that looks interesting, I can go ahead and just package that as a PR. And
I mean, that's definitely interesting to me. Bez, how do you feel about that approach, just sort of at a high level?
Which one?
intercepting the ABCI methods in base app and then having a database driver that allows you to forward those to a third-party database.
I mean, definitely warrants further discussion. My immediate concern is like, what kind of performance overhead does it add to the rest of the application?
That's a good question.
Is it kind of, it's like working in the background? Is it not impeding on other aspects of processing transactions?
My initial idea was to do it in the background, and I still intended to do that. But the way I'm doing it is that only certain nodes are going to run those indexers. So
it would be fairly easy to intercept the message, toss it down a channel to a Go routine that handles the database writes, and then using context prevent writes from failing in the background. Yeah, also, if you're running this on the same host, like in a Docker container or within some private network, those database connections are not going to fail that often. It would be a negligible performance impact, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that, you know, you could do is you could even write a generic just way of kind of creating a queue in a separate Go routine that just has it in a separate thread. That can totally be done. That was my original intention. I didn't do it in my current implementation because I just needed to get it working correctly as opposed to performantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I only currently have it running in one of my testnet nodes. So it's like, well, if you want to get that index, you hit that node, and other nodes are slowed down. And you could have it be a non-validator node. You know, that my supposition is that you probably want to disable indexing in general for validator nodes. And just
almost every case, except when you want an indexer. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to take a peek at that. If you just like push it up in a PR, it's a great way to kind of drive discussion there. So cool. Thank you guys.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. Aaron, thanks for the feedback there.
Yeah, I just had a question about this stuff. So how's this different from, like, you know, why can't you just add a tag to whatever message you want to index and then have a separate service that listens for that specific tag and just, you know,
another way to
dump those into a database? Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing for pushes right now.
That's another way to do it.
On our side, a couple of reasons. So, probably the main reason that I chose not to do that approach is because, you know, the tags, you only see what the transaction contains. You don't see what actually ends up in state. And so if you have any logic that's in your keepers that causes whatever the state changes to be more complex than what shows up in the transaction, you can't index just off of those transactions. And specifically in our case, we have some like deferred transactions. For instance, we have proposals. You can make a proposal, and then that proposal will get executed when there's enough votes. But the proposal is equivalent of a transaction message. So to go back to see what the actual message was, you're going to have to go back to a transaction that was submitted a long time ago. It can get even more complex once we implement like our model for contracts, because contracts will effectively be able to execute their own transactions if they have the permissions. And so in order to see what those actually were, you're going to have to look at the state to sort of see what that data is. It's not all just going to show up in the transaction log. Unless you had links going back all the way, and it's like, well, yeah, maybe you could set that up, but it's just easier for me to be able to look at the state store. And also,
yeah,
sorry.
My initial kind of gut feeling about this is the base app probably would not change. If anything, like there could be custom logic defined in begin or end blocker of your application.
Yeah, so what I did is I just wrapped the base app, you know, methods to intercept them. So I basically, you know, kind of just inherited from base app.
Oh, no, you do that too.
Rather than having to just upgrade base app. But, you know, if this, you know, custom begin blocker, end blocker, that, you know, that gets you some of it, but it doesn't actually get you the delivered TX messages. So I also wanted to, I mean, those are the three main things I'm indexing: begin, end block, and deliver TX. And also commit, because if it doesn't commit successfully, then
yeah,
I'm not going to submit the transaction at the index. So I mean, anyway, you can take a look at. I can open a PR and just message how it is.
Okay.
Look at my issue and decide whether it makes sense or not.
Shane, what are your thoughts there?
Personally, we haven't had a need to do anything like this so far. So I would have to look at that issue, and I guess I don't really understand the use case or need for it yet. But
Cool.
yeah, it's just not something we have to deal with yet.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have specific needs to do geospatial indexing in our case.
Geospatial indexing, having done it before in databases that don't support it, not the easiest thing. Totally get that. Any other questions before we wrap today? Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. See you same bat time, same bat channel in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye.